Welcome to Pilgrim Church in Birmingham, Alabama. This is our 43rd Sunday in non-ordinary time. As we begin a new year together, let us join in worship and song as we begin with our opening hymn, All People That on Earth Do Dwell. The words will be on your screen.
Our contemporary reading this morning is from Morality by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. One significant contribution of religion today is that it preserves what society as a whole has begun to lose, that strong sense of being there for one another, of being ready to exercise mutual aid, to help people in need, to comfort the distressed and bereaved, to welcome the lonely, to share in other people's sadness and celebrations. These moral responses have not disappeared. We see them whenever there is a communal tragedy, a shooting, a terrorist incident, or a major accident. People come together to give help and support. Our well springs of altruism have not run dry. They are part of what makes us human.
As we gather for prayer here at Pilgrim, we always begin with our gratitudes. And this week we have a gratitude from Marcia for her husband Troy, who has been exploring pour art, which is art that you pour things in, evidently, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
Teresa asks us to join her in gratitude that Mayor Woodfin, Birmingham's mayor, is out of the hospital with his COVID, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
Bill is grateful that the Capitol Police were able to thwart the insurrection at the Capitol this week, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
And this week we have received several donations in gratitude for the life of Ethel Owen, and we are grateful for all those who are remembering her life and legacy, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
And Larry is grateful that a friend of his that has had gallbladder surgery is doing very well, for all God's goodness.
Thanks be to God.
For concerns, Teresa asks us for prayers for Luna, her golden retriever, as they decide on surgery. God, in your mercy.
Hear our prayers.
John asks us to pray for Blair's father, for Blair, whose father died this week unexpectedly. God, in your mercy. We want to remember our church members, Janice and Ralph Grady, who have been diagnosed with COVID, as well as one of their sons. God, in your mercy. For Teresa, for her nephew Jackie, who is continually to struggle with illness. God, in your mercy. And Teresa asks us to pray for Mac and Polly, who have lung issues. God, in your mercy. And finally from Teresa, her brother-in-law, who is dealing with pulmonary fibrosis. God, in your mercy. Much going on in our lives and world. Let us join together as one and go before God in prayer. We are grateful, O God, that even with everything swirling around us this week, we have gathered in your presence and know that stillness that brings us to our center, that holds us in your calmness, that gives us the ability to let go, to perceive, to be present. All the things that are on our hearts and minds today, we lift to you. We lift our gratitudes, our gratefulness. We lift our unknowns over which we have no control. We lift our world that continues to spin into chaos and continues to call forth from those in leadership to either respond with a grand view or a less than grand view. Spirit of the living God, may your presence be felt by all your people this day. May we know your touch, and may we respond to your moments of grace. For we lift our prayers, our concerns, our gratitudes in the name of Jesus, who taught us to pray. Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy dominion come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the dominion, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Sitting or standing, let us offer our reverence for the word from God found in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. God speaks the world into being. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Listen for the word from God.
Thanks be to God. You may remember that last Sunday we looked at the prologue of John's Gospel that offered one version of creation. The prologue, of course, is the beginning verses of John's Gospel. And today you noticed we have our reading from the first chapter of Genesis with another version of creation story. Actually, these are some of the most famous words in our world. In the beginning. Most people hearing that know where that comes from. And thus begins the first creation story in the Bible. Now, unlike the second creation story, John's Gospel is actually number 3. The second was found in the second chapter of Genesis, where God actually walks in the garden like the humans. But in this first creation story in Genesis, God is portrayed as the cosmic creator, the author of light, the cosmic artist, turning imagination into matter. You see, the ancient Hebrews were not the only people who told creation stories. All the peoples around them, all the tribes and nations had their own creation stories. But unlike their neighbor, the Hebrews didn't have warring gods and goddesses vying for dominance or battling for control. There was only Elohim, the God of the universe. It is believed that this creation story in Genesis 1 comes from the time that the nation of Israel had been taken into captivity in Babylon. Now, the Babylonians themselves had a religion that had a god for everything. There was Anu, who was the god of the sky. The goddess Kai was the earth. Shamash was the sun. Sin was the moon. All of nature was composed of various gods to be worshipped. But the Hebrews had only one God. A God who spoke worlds into being with a word. Think about that for a second. Words create worlds. If I were to say to you, I have a dream, you would know what that's talking about. The famous words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If I were to say, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, you would probably know who said that. President Kennedy. If you judge people, you have no time to love them. That was the world that Mother Teresa's words created. In our contemporary reading, Rabbi Sachs tells us that faith communities are becoming one of the last bastions of resistance to the creation of a world where I is more important than us. Now, we saw this echoed in John's Gospel last Sunday. Of course, it must be said that the faith communities Rabbi Sachs refers to are those who embody the Great Commission. The message is to all the world. And they embody the Great Commandment. Love others as you love yourself. These kinds of communities of faith are different than what we're seeing modeled in much of our world. And make no mistake, communities of faith can be just as susceptible to collusion as individuals. It is often easier to see the difference that Sachs is calling us to that is different from the blatant individualism of our day by simply going online. Go to YouTube and enter Karen, and you will find video after video of someone acting badly because their I was the most important filter of their lives. Listen to Donald Trump's speech to the crowd gathered in Washington before they stormed the Capitol, and you will clearly see the difference between an I mentality and a we mentality. Words create worlds. And right now, our nation is not living in the same world. We have mentalities that create a world that is all about me and my needs. And we have a separate world that many of us live in that is about us. The kind of world that is created determines then how we live out our lives, how we care or don't care for each other. You see, in narcissistic individualism, my I is the most important value of life. Forgive the pun, but it trumps every other value. It is more important than love. It is more important than grace. It is more important than compassion. You see, it is rooted in the assumption that the world is a dangerous place, and my self-preservation is the only thing that matters. This fearful worldview can only be sustained by a steady diet of fearing the stranger, distrust of common institutions, and focusing on preconceived injustices to me that others don't face. But the creation to which Genesis calls us offers light as the first gift that creates a place for us. The first creation story is about the gifts of grace offered to humanity, to all of us. Light, water, food, beauty, creatures, companionship, love. None of these gifts are given to just one person or even one group of persons. They were gifts to the world, to all of us. There's an old story about a man named Harry who was hosting a dinner party, and one of his special guests at the table was a surgeon that Harry really wanted to impress. So as he was carving the roast, Harry kept a running commentary directed at his friend. "How am I doing, Doc?" he would ask. "How do you like my technique? I'd make a pretty good surgeon, don't you think?" After he was done, Harry proudly set the platter with the slices of meat in front of his guest. And with a twinkle in his eye, the surgeon looked up at his friend and said quietly, "You know, Harry, anybody can take them apart. Now let's see you put them back together again." Words create worlds. When my focus is I, it's easy to tear others apart. When our focus is we learn that we care about how to put each other back together when the world we've created tears us apart. You know, later in this creation story from Genesis, something peculiar happens that has often stumped biblical readers. When it comes time to create humans, the story has God saying, "Let us create humans in our image, in our likeness." You know, theologians have argued that this is an early indication of Trinitarian thinking. But what if it isn't? What if, from the very beginning of the human story, we were created to be we, because the essence of God embodied we. Words create worlds. Let there be light. And there was light. Let us create humans in our image, in our likeness. Just another experience of God that makes you go, Amen.
Amen.
As we prepare for this morning's offering, you will find options for giving on your screen, or you can go directly to our website at pilgrimuccbham.org.
Our closing hymn is Shine, Jesus Shine. You're going to be wanting to be able to move around this one. It's got a nice tune with it. The words will be on your screen. Thank you for being with us today. I hope that this worship experience has blessed your life and heart. Before we go, I'll remind you that we do have our Pilgrim Book Club every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And we are reading the book by Rabbi Sacks, Morality. So please, if you're interested in being a part of that, you can send me a note. The Sunday that you will see this, the following week, we will be looking at chapters 5 and 6. Our annual congregational meeting happens next Sunday, January 17th. We have sent out a mailing to all the congregation with all the files or the documents that you'll need for that meeting. If you did not get one of those, you can call us here at the church and we'll be glad to get you that information. It will be via Zoom on January 17th at 11 a.m. So we hope you will join with us. There's a Zoom link that we have sent out to everyone. Again, if you have not gotten that, please let me know and I'll make sure you do receive that. And now, my friends, we go from our time together to our time apart. May you know that world that is us, that keeps us connected even when we are not in the same room or even in the same city. For God's grace is able to do that. See you next week.